And welcome back to the regular council meeting for May 7th. We are resuming at 8:18. Counselor, why do I call you Counselor?
I don't know, but I don't want to be
CAO Scoble. After a discussion in camera, we have CAO Scoble, who's...
So I think, first of all, you need a motion to come out of in-camera.
We did that.
Okay, and sorry, I missed that. And then perhaps go through the delegations, I would suggest.
Right. Sorry. So we have delegations tonight. We have 3. And at this time, I'd like to just remind everyone that members of the public and community organizations who wish to present an item to Town Council for consideration are welcome to register to attend a regular council meeting as a delegation. Delegations are given up to 10 minutes to present. Please be aware that a bell will ring at the 9-minute mark, providing you 1 minute to conclude your comments. And we have 3 delegations, as I said earlier. Our first delegation is the Foothills Advocacy and Motion Society, FAME, and Jerry McCallum is here to present.
Good evening, Your Worship and Town Councillors. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mrs. Andrea Galwin, who's the Director of our Client Services for FAME. So we are just here to share information with the council, with Strathmore Council. We are an agency that supports adults with developmental disabilities in Strathmore and surrounding area. And we sent in a video. It's about a 4-minute video, so I know it's going to use up some of our 10 minutes. But we'd like to just show that video, if we could, and that tells what our company's about. Nice to meet you. Oh, yeah, thank you.
I'm McCollum, and I'm the Executive Director of the Foothills Advocacy and Motion Society. FAME offers supports to adults with developmental disabilities in the communities of High River, Okotoks, Strathmore, and Airdrie. We were incorporated in 1980 and currently offer support to 160 adults in these rural communities. We assist these individuals to both live and work in their community of choice.
One aspect of FAME's employment supports is the recycling program, which offers weekly recycling pickups for over 300 customers in High River and surrounding areas. This venture allows individuals supported by FAME to gain work experience and practice relatable skills that will help them to work independently in the future. Assisting people with developmental disabilities to be a part of their community is a FAME mission and mandate. We strive to achieve inclusion by supporting people in employment and volunteer opportunities, social enterprise situations, fitness participation, as well as social activities. We have a large presence in the community, and that provides the opportunity for people to be recognized and appreciated for their talents. Having a variety of options provides people with a chance to get involved, forging the connections that invite their perspectives to be voiced, heard, and valued. Thoughtful inclusion creates a space where diversity is accepted and celebrated. Respite is another main part of the support offered to adults we support in the home living department. Respite means giving adults at FAME a rest from their regular routine and a chance to get away for an overnight or weekend with a qualified respite provider. This provides opportunities to expand social connections and activities. FAME also assists about 30 adults with outreach support. This service is where we assist people who live independently with skills such as meal preparation, budgeting, attending doctor's appointments, and many other needs. Where we live is very important to all of us. At FAME, we are privileged to walk with the adults we support to develop caring, long-lasting places to live in the communities they call home. We refer to these as care provider or supportive roommate scenarios. Currently at FAME, we have almost 100 of these successful relationships. FAME has been able to access local churches and community centers in our 4 locations to enhance our programs. These facilities have been crucial in allowing FAME to manage the demand on our infrastructures. We are humbled by the incredible growth in our branches. We have outgrown our space, and when all people are into the office, we are packed. In some ways, this is a good thing. People are pleased with what our agency can offer. However, this overcrowding is creating an issue where we are currently not able to meet the demands for our services, and we had quite a wait list. This means that people who should be receiving support from FAME are not able to receive services.
As you can see, we are in need of more space to offer supports to those people on our wait list. We ask that you consider partnering with FAME to meet these challenges. Your financial contributions will assist us to meet our current facility challenges as well as those in the future.
So I'm just going to share just a couple things about our company. Then Annie's going to talk about a project that we are working on that we want to share with council. So we're a not-for-profit society supporting adults with developmental disabilities. So we've been in existence for, it'll be 45 years in a couple of weeks. So, and then we support adults in 4 communities, High River, Okotoks. We moved into Strathmore in 2009. So 15, 16 years here. And then we just opened an office in Airdrie in June of 2024. So we currently support 180 individuals and their families. So we're a not-for-profit funded by the provincial government, Seniors and Community Social Services Ministry, and we have a volunteer board of directors that govern us.
So as you heard in the video, the reason for our presentation tonight is just to give Strathmore Town Council awareness of our current expansion project in the town of Strathmore. So we have outgrown our current location. We're down on 3rd Avenue right now. And over the last couple of years, we've just noticed that our building is cramped and we have a wait list and we have people still looking for services. And so we were able to make an offer on the building at 1016 Westridge Road several months ago. I guess it was around October. And we started renovations on that building in January. And so we are about 3 weeks out, hopefully, from being able to take possession of that building, get in and start utilizing that space. And we're very excited about it. And so, as the video mentioned, in most of our locations, we've experienced these pressures over the last couple years, and Strathmore was our most recent pressing matter. And so we're very excited to be entering this location. And in our presentation, we do have a few pictures of, if you're familiar with the location, you might have seen our sign on the highway there. The side one. The sign says, "Coming soon, FAME, spring 2025.
I don't know, maybe. Can you click the slides?
Our battery might be dead.
Oh, sorry.
All right, I'll ad-lib a little bit. So in that building used to be a bowling alley, and then there were a few other things that moved in over the years. When we took possession of this building, the back was just a big open warehouse, and so we've gone in with a designer who has done up a layout for us that we feel is going to suit our needs. I believe we have about 12 offices that will occupy that space, as well as 2 fairly open common areas for individuals to gather, socialize, have lunch. Obviously, our biggest mandate is community, and so being out in the community is the most important. However, we do have lots of need for a space where people can gather and spend time with their peers during the day. And so this location, we feel, along with the parking that it will offer for our staff as well as our families and care providers who do drop-offs and pickups, this space is just going to fulfill a lot of those needs for us.
Like Andy said, there's a sign that says "Coming Soon, Fame," and we've had some people reach us to us and say, like, what is Fame and what's coming soon? So we just thought it'd be good to share that with all of you. There. We have found, like I mentioned, we're in 4 different communities. There's a lot of demand in Strathmore and surrounding area, and to a point there, we couldn't support any more people because of just space, and so we're very excited. This property really allows us to meet a demand today, but 5 to 10 years down the road. So we're not asking for anything. We're just sharing information, and we're going to be having a grand opening of this new this facility in August. We certainly will invite council, and we'd appreciate any of your participation. That's it.
Thank you for your presentation. Questions or comments from Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know we had a conversation some time ago when you were talking about moving into this location about the gravel parking lot and how difficult that will be. That'll present some challenges, and I know that most recently in another project that because I know that some of your clientele are over the age of 50. I worked in another project where they were eligible for the New Horizons grant, the New Horizons Community Grant, because you have both volunteers and clientele that fit into the category that would make you eligible for that grant for that purpose. And so I know that there are lots of people who would be happy to reach out in terms of trying to mitigate that. I know it wouldn't go far, but it might help in terms of accessing, in the egress at the front and side of the building.
Thank you for that information. Actually, it's getting paved either Friday or Monday. So
already,
so we're really happy
wonderful.
with that.
So the grant will have to be for something else.
And we'll maybe be able to figure something out for sure.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear that. And the second question I had was to wonder if you had reached out to the Siksika Nation in partnership, and reason being is that what did you say, Your Worship? Almost 10% or 12% of our population now is Indigenous here. Yeah, in that realm anyway. I know in 2021, I think you said close to 1,000 members of our community were Indigenous, and our Director Pretzloff is nodding his head, and Director, I did it again. But thank you. He's not voting for a change. And so the other thing is that there is a doctor on Siksika Nation who is probably the foremost authority in, I'll speak on her behalf, in Canada on Jordan's Principle. And I know that they would be really interested in partnering with you. And if there's any way that any of us can help with that, we'd be willing to do that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for being part of our community. It's communities are judged by how they treat the people who most need them, so I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you for coming to visit us tonight. And Jerry, it's lovely to meet you. I spent a bit of time working with FAME prior to being elected here on council, and so I know how important the work you do in the community is and what it means to the members of the community that you serve. And I just want to say how thrilled I was when I saw that you were moving to a new facility, something with a little more space and a little bit of access for folks to get in and out, because I know we had some discussions before about some troubles getting in and out over the curb. So I know that this will solve those solutions solve those problems. And I'm also really glad that no one will have to back that truck out in and out of that back alley anymore, because that was a nightmare. So I just wanted to thank you for the work you do in the community. Thank you for the supports you give to these community members. And I'm really thrilled to see that you'll be expanding here and helping more folks become part of our community and feel included in everything that happens in Strathmore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. I enjoyed your presentation. I noticed some familiar faces from my high school English classes and phys ed, I had some kids from the Strive program there come into my classes, and so I saw some familiar faces, and if I can in August, I'll try to attend whatever you have for a grand opening. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation tonight. It was good meeting you, good seeing you again. Thank you. We move to item 6.2, delegation, Wheatland and Area Hospice Society. Dr. Joni McNeely is presenting, I believe. And I believe you have someone else with you tonight. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'd like to introduce one of the directors of our board, Ms. Randy Collins. First of all, the only thing I'd like to say is thank you very much to the town of Strathmore. We had a very successful hype for hospice this weekend. I very much appreciate the contributions that the town gave the event, from the use of the facility, the Kinsman Park, the amphitheater, the farmers market, as well as the participation of the town of Strathmore Fire Department. So thank you, and Randy has a few things that she'd like to say regarding the progress since the last time I spoke.
All right. So I don't have a lengthy presentation or anything like that. But one of the things that we were noticing as board members is there's a lot of confusion as to where Wheatland Housing and Wheatland Hospice intermingle, where they end, where they start. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is come today to start to discuss those items. So the first thing is that we have an independent board. We are not the same. We are completely separated. And our board has different ideas, different project goals, and what we intend to do. So in terms of the project itself, I know that there's lots of questions as to how it's funded, how it's going to operate, because obviously not being funded by a housing board, we will operate completely different. We will have to operate completely different. We are a not-for-profit organization. We don't have any ability to requisition funds. We're not asking for funds. We're not here knocking on anyone's door. The intention of trying to work together with Wheatland Housing Management Board was intentionally trying to cut costs for both organizations, to allow for both to thrive, to allow for both to hopefully knock less on your guys' doors asking for money and requisitioning individuals. So we are not anything to do with housing. We are not. We are hospice. We're about palliative care. We're about making sure that end-of-life care is there. You guys have heard the spiels. You know exactly what the intention is. That being said, how is it going to operate? So you know that there's been the pitches, and it's kind of just been all rolled into one, that it's just this housing project. But they are two separate projects. They just happen to be proposed to be housed within the same group. So what is the goal? What is the anticipated plan? The short answer is we have ideas, but it also is dependent on, unfortunately, so many mitigating and differentiating factors. One being, of course, funding. One, of course, being whether or not the Housing Management Board can get all of their ducks in a row and all of the things that they're needed as well. So I'll focus primarily on what our plan is and what our hopes are. Yes, we will plan to share the facility. That plan would be, and as it currently stands and is open to change, the potential of creating a similar situation as to the WID have with Marigold. How that would essentially work is that although both of them operate completely independently, both have different access points, there are shared common areas which would allow for those cost savings. And that was the entire intention of that project itself. That would be the intention of our project. What would be essentially happening is that there would be the potential, if it was permitted, to move towards a condo type situation where there would be different units that have those shared common spaces. We would not be a part of any requisition. We would not be part of any capital funding or operational costs that would be asked for from Wheatland County, asked for from the town of Strathmore. We are completely fundraising-based organization at this point. The wonderful individuals that came along before me have already raised $6.8 million to date, which is extraordinary. And that is covering the anticipated costs so far of the potential build. There is going to be operational concerns, which is something that they're working on, and we have teamed up with other hospices across Alberta to hopefully to form groups to come together to put some pressure on the provincial government in terms of that funding and what that looks like. That is not a municipal concern at this point, nor do we believe it will be. Questions that differentiate us between Wheatland Housing. We are not looking or anticipating getting any funds such as CMHC mortgages. That is not something that we are currently at part of our plan. That is not something on the table for us. That is a housing potential. That is a housing, part of housing that we don't have, nor is it something that we're seeking. So we're not looking for letters of support. We're not having any of this as part of a financing plan. Our plan is that we have reached our financing by the individuals that are supporting in the community, the county outside of the town of Strathmore as well, for the individuals that really want to make this happen. And I think that's the true testament of the individuals that want to make it happen. Although I sit on the board, I am a lawyer by trade. I'll try not to let that show too many times in any kind of speech. But we are cognizant of the realities that the town of Strathmore is going to be on the hook for requisitions. They're going to be concerned about their in-kind contributions, what they're going to be requested to do under housing and under the Housing Act. We're cognizant of that, and so what we are proposing in any structure that we propose is going to be cognizant that any in-kind contribution obviously can't be allocated to us. We're well aware of that, and that is something that we will work with the town of Strathmore to ensure that if there are portions, for example, portions of the land that are going to be used to us, how is that going to impact the town of Strathmore and their in-kind contributions? For example, we'll be looking at different options as to whether or not there is contribution via by us paying for that potentially, or whether or not that is a form of donation. That is something that we can discuss with the town of Strathmore. But we are cognizant that it will impact the in-kind contributions based on the amount of that value of land that is going to be deemed to be going to Wheatland Housing versus what is going to be deemed to be going to the Wheatland Hospice. So that is something that we are cognizant of. So when we are looking at what that structure would look like, we are also looking at how the operating funds will move forward. So in this type of structure, we would see a general condominium type structure where there would be requisitions of funds from the two condo units, being the shared costs of operations. Everyone will have their own operational costs. So the actual nuts and bolts of the operational costs will be borne by their own. We will be responsible for our own costs. They'll be responsible for their own costs. The only things that we really will share, which are the things that are the cost savings that do help save on those future requisitions, things such as the shared services, so being able to share a kitchen, being able to provide those additional services, the ability to share security, a parking lot, making sure that the landscaping is taken care of, making sure it's a beautiful facility. Those things can be cut in terms of the costs by having those two housed within one building. Those are the things that we are really focusing on in trying to save those operational funds. We've done all the studies, we've taken a look, and operating completely on our own is not that feasible. The costs are very high to put in those commercial kitchens. The costs are very high to do the landscaping and all of the other things that can be shared by utilizing the building together. So that is the intentions of trying to build together. And as well, we do believe that Wheatland Housing will also see that shared benefit in reduced costs of the operations of their facility. So in general, the purpose of coming today, we gave you guys no indication of what we were coming to say or what we were really wanting to do, is just to engage a little bit further in those discussions, to give you guys a little bit of peace of mind to know that we are cognizant of this. This isn't all of a sudden one wrapped up ball where now there's a straggler attached to the big, heavy financial requests that will come with that project. That we are attempting to alleviate some of that burden and to be able to provide those services while obviously trying to share those costs. So I guess pending any further questions, I don't have much of a structured presentation beyond that, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Obviously, sitting as a board member for hospice, although I can give some general overviews in terms of Wheatland Housing Management Board, obviously I'm not speaking on their behalf.
Thank you for your presentation. It definitely addresses a lot of the questions that I had, and I appreciate it very much. Councillor Wiley?
Yeah, that was my concern. So what I hear you saying is even though when the land is transferred to Wheatland Housing and the hospice joint title to the property, there isn't a situation in which, I'll just be blunt because I don't know how else to say it, but maybe that the hospice fails, they can't raise the money operationally, they're not being successful. My fear is that somehow they could turn that into a requisition that could somehow come back to the town instead of the province.
And that's a fair concern to have. So one of the potential situations where that could occur would be if there was a stipulation that if the hospice was to fail, that would naturally then flow to Wheatland Housing. So they would then own that space, which would then potentially increase the amount of operating costs for them. That would be really the situation that could potentially occur. But generally speaking, I think that could be addressed by having restrictions on what we can do with the land and how it does become managed after the fact in the event of the worst case scenario. So I do think that could be managed in terms of the negotiation of the contract, and especially into the land use and what that land use is going to be permitted. So whether or not there would be permitted uses in the future, such as, you know, a daycare like it's attached or something other of that nature, that could really be controlled by the town to ensure that the space is utilized in a way that is still serving the needs of which the original intent was.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Montgomery and then Deputy Mayor Mitzner.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I would just like to share that based on our aging demographics, town of Strathmore and surrounding area, I personally do not believe the hospice is going to fail. Thank you.
Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. What is the business model of the hospice? Like, is it planned to charge money to people that are going to be using the hospice?
No. So it is a not-for-profit organization. There is no intention to charge money. It is an end-of-life service that will be free of charge. So this is essentially a fundraised community service that does not require somebody to pay money to die peacefully.
Okay. Now, I don't want to use the word requisition because I understand that requisitions are a power that Wheatland Housing has. So you're saying, though, that we should expect the hospice to not come to the town at some point in the future and ask for help with operating costs?
I don't think any not-for-profit can say that they'll never ask for community help when they're servicing the community. I don't think that is a realistic option. But what I will say is that at this point, it is not something that is in our requirement to successfully open. Whether or not that changes in the future, whether or not there is going to be partnership options in the future to make sure that we can expand, we can grow or properly service the client or the patients within the surrounding area, it's unknown whether or not we will be seeking, but there's no positive obligation for the town. So that would be based on a partnership with the town of Strathmore wanting to engage to make sure that that facility is to the standards and provides the services that they want for their individuals.
Okay. So it sounds like you're saying that there's a possibility that the Wheatland Hospice Society could come to the town, though, for operating costs once it's open?
Essentially, it's no different than the previous presentation that you saw from FAME. That would be like asking them, well, are you going to ask us for money? The question is they're saying, we are operating. In our situation, we're going to operate. We are not for profit. They have different funding sources. We will have different funding sources. We're looking at the Alberta province right now to be helping with helping with funding in terms of operations, in terms of the amount of beds. At this point, we're not seeking anything, nor do we have a power to requisition anything from the town of Strathmore. So the question that you're asking me would be the question that you would be asking any not-for-profit when they're coming in here saying, we hope to operate and to provide these services for the town of Strathmore. Would you typically turn to them and say, well, are you going to ask us for money?
Yeah, I would say the difference, though, is that like FAME, for instance, and other not-for-profits already have an operating history, whereas you guys you don't have any history at all operating, and you also don't have an actual plan to fund your operation yet. And you are probably familiar, I presume, with the target rate for hospice that the Alberta government would like to provide. And so you're probably familiar as well that there is a hospice that is being built that is going to be provincially funded by the hospital, right?
We're aware, but we as well have not seen any shovels in the ground on that project as well.
Okay, but a lack of shovels in the ground today, are you suggesting that that means that that's not going to happen, though?
That is a for-profit corporation. You have no indication as to what's going to happen, nor do you have any indication what's going to happen with the upcoming funding by the provincial government. As you probably are aware, there's been substantial changes to most of the acts that cover the end-of-life care, including palliative care. There is shifts in all of the funding. There are multiple hospices across Alberta that are shifts in funding. So in terms of them securing the current funding, that is up for change. And with a for-profit corporation, much like a not-for-profit corporation, they can decide that if their funding is pulled, they don't feel like building their building. So that is also dependent highly on funding, which was secured in 2018.
I think it was 2020.
Oh, sorry,
that they got the
2020.
contract. Yeah. And so you're probably aware that just that one hospice that is provincially funded, or will be provincially funded, as they have a contract, that will actually put our region over the target for hospice beds by about triple.
So I disagree with your assessment on that in terms of putting our hospice beds, because what they are suggesting is a different level of care as well that we are suggesting. That is a long-term housing facility, which we have in terms of our description of what hospice is a very different level of care as to what they have planned. There is a very open and generous determination as to what long-term care, as it relates to palliative care, as it relates to hospice itself. So whether or not it's going to be sufficient for our aging population, I would disagree that there is an assessment that it puts us over any type of threshold in terms of what is permitted. That is based on funding. That is based on a provincial assessment of funding, not a provincial assessment of necessity, in my opinion.
In your opinion?
In my opinion.
Okay, but so when the Alberta government, sets a target rate, per 100,000 people, and we have 30,000 people in the region, and we are basically being supplied triple the number of beds just in that one hospice, it gives me concern that provincial funding for Wheatland Hospice will probably not be forthcoming, which is why I'm concerned. And I understand, again, that you don't have the power to requisition. I understand that. I don't call it a requisition, but I do believe that there is a chance, a very high chance, that Wheatland Hospice will come and with the moral obligation, okay, not a requisition, but they will present a moral obligation to continue the operations of the organization in the face of not being able to get steady funding. That's my concern. And my concern, I guess, is that we would be putting an unfair burden on local taxpayers for something that might not be necessary based on the numbers and the targets that Alberta Health and the Alberta government strive for when providing hospice or palliative care. So that's where I'm coming from, And so, so when I kind of bring up things about, like, for instance, the hospice, they came on November 20th, and asked to be put on the title. At that time, I asked, is there a plan to use this, to put debt on the land? And I was told there really wasn't a plan at the time. But then since then, I've learned that the Hospice Society has been asking the town to help facilitate putting debt on that land. And which, I'm confused because, as you just mentioned, you guys have raised $6.8 million, and I believe $250,000 of that is operational funds. So I'm not sure why the hospice would even need to borrow money if you guys already have all the money you need for the capital build. Do you want to talk about that?
So there's quite a few statements that you've made, but I'll first start with the last and then I'm going to work my way forward. There is no requisition. There's been no person that has approached the town of Strathmore to facilitate debt and to facilitate any lending. So I would put to you that I'm not sure where that information's come from, but that's incorrect.
So nobody from the hospice has approached the town about putting debt on that land once it transfers title?
No. We have no intention at this moment of getting debt on that land, so I'm not sure where that information is coming from.
The February meeting minutes from the Wheatland Housing Management
That's
Body
not
meeting,
hospice, with all due respect. Let's
says
remember
in the
Wheatland
minutes, it
Wheatland
says
Housing.
that the hospice is looking to put debt on that land and that they are working with the town to make that happen. That's what the minutes say.
That, I can't answer that because we are not Wheatland Housing, but that is an incorrect statement. The hospice has never sought any funding or any type of debt to put on that land. Absolutely not.
Councillor Peterson, can you speak to that since you're on that board?
Well, I think that, my mic isn't on, but I think that Keith Clayton could speak to it as well, because what happened, it preceded the donation of $2.25 million to the hospice. And I think that one of the things
Excuse me, we're talking about the February meeting. Yeah. The money was donated in, I think, November is when the $2 million was donated.
When we were initially having the discussions around having the hospice on the actual deed, discussion at that time did speak to the hospice being able to use it to underpin any necessity of borrowing into the future. So the fact that you don't need to now is true, and you don't need to have that now. And so I think that there may be people that are still under that assumption, that don't understand that you no longer need any funding, any capital funding as you move forward. That is no longer a reality. And so Wheatland Housing Management Body completely understands that as well. And I don't know if Keith Clayton wants to speak to it any further, but I would say that we're very clear on the point that you just made.
Thank you. So in terms of the statement that you don't want to put in any additional tax burden on individuals that are taxpayers, I understand that. That's absolutely a fair comment. But how many ratepayers have you asked? We have $6.8 million that we've raised. I'm going to put to you that the ratepayers have made their statement about whether or not they want to financially put money into this.
I've donated my own money, actually, until I learned that there was a provincially funded hospice that was being built, and that made me realize that, unfortunately, Wheatland Hospice probably wouldn't be getting provincial funding, which means that I'll talk about the April 12th meeting from last year where I went to at the Civic Center. The hospice put on a thing, and in their own literature, it says that failing the province funding, they were going to be coming to the municipalities for funding, per capita funding. And it's back then it was in the range of $45 per capita.
That was always an option to ask municipalities. There's no obligation for municipalities. So when we are in a fundraising phase, of course they're going to look at every single option in trying to fundraise money, just
Well, no,
like
this is,
every
sorry,
other.
sorry, this wasn't fundraising. This was talking about operational costs. This is after it was built. They were saying, if the province won't fund us, we'll go to the municipalities. And I get it. I understand that. As I mentioned before, there's no power to force the town, but when your organization is, in trouble, I'm absolutely certain you would be coming to the town, not you maybe, but somebody from Wheatland Hospice would be coming to the town and saying, hey, we need money, we need steady money, otherwise we're going to fail. And it would be on, the council of the day to, make that decision, obviously. But as I mentioned before, there would be the appearance of a moral obligation, okay, to continue to fund that operation.
I think if you're making the statement that there's a moral obligation to fund that operation, you would find that there is obviously some reason for you to believe that there would be a moral obligation. If you believe that it was not a necessity, if you believe that there were way too many beds for the people that needed it, what moral obligation would you feel to fund it?
Well, there's sentimental reasons as well that people might, or emotional reasons people might agree to fund a second hospice within our community. There's got to be a reason why people are trying to build a second hospice beyond, considering it would be quadrupling or more than the capacity or the supply of beds that the region needs. So I think there's more at play here, obviously, than just kind of, facts and numbers and stuff like that. There's feelings, there's emotions, there's, sentimental, feelings, et cetera. And I think, so there's, if I could just, if I could see into a crystal ball and know that the Council of the Future would just say, no thanks, we've already got a provincially funded hospice, I wouldn't be kind of, wasting my time spreading the word, I guess. And, to answer your question, there are a lot of people in the community actually who, who maybe you haven't heard from, that actually don't support a municipally funded hospice, and they have the same concerns. They have, their checkbooks are tight, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they really don't like the sound of a second hospice that, as much as a hospice is nice to have for a community, it's not a necessity, obviously, but it's nice to have, and people, people want to take care. You're right about the fact that people want to take care of vulnerable people. That's true. We have a community that's full of caring people, and the people that want to do the right thing, and but that doesn't. That doesn't necessarily, kind of mean that there's support, in general for all things for all vulnerable people, or oversupplying, for vulnerable people necessarily.
Could there not be a definite level of care difference between a hospice run by a private enterprise versus one run by a group like this Wheatland Hospice Society? I know if I was facing end of life for myself or a very close loved one, and I had the two to choose from, I know where I'm going with my choice.
Absolutely, and if you attended any of the information sessions, and you've probably heard Joni McNeely speak on several occasions, she's very passionate. One of the driving factors is the level of care, and as well, the experience for end of life. One of the amazing aspects of being in the Kinsman Park is the idea of being able to open doors and seeing green space, is being able to have space for your family to gather, being able to die with the people you love around them, with the care, with the level of respect that we would like to see people have at end of life, and also respecting Indigenous cultures, also respecting religions and the different ways that people want to die in peace. The terminology you'll hear quite often is beds at the end of the hall, which is when you have a for-profit corporation, the reality is that the haves come before the have-nots, and money matters. So at the end of the day, your death is going to depend on the dollars and cents of that corporation and how much money they can make. The reality is that yes, part of that funding comes from the provincial government, but the vast majority come from the huge amount that is paid by the individuals that are residing there. Less care will be provided to the areas that don't make them money. Death is not a money game. Death doesn't make people money. So what it is going to be a potential of the rooms at the end of the hall. You spent a ton of money to live here, and now we'll just wheel you down and potentially let you die at the end of the hall. That is not the intention of the Hospice Society. There's also other features to the hospice that are widely overlooked, which is the additional caregivers, the respite care, the individuals that come for end-of-life care into your household. That is also aspects that is part of our fundraising and part of our programming that isn't offered in any traditional brick-and-mortar hospice care. And so again, that is why we are so thankful and hopeful that we do end up in Kinsman Park, is the ability, and the drawings and the renderings are amazing, to be able to open the doors and to allow people to get that breath of fresh air and to see some green space prior to death. And that is why, like you've stated, there is that emotional attachment, why there are people willing to open up their pocketbooks, even if it means that it's more money at the end of the day, because there's that additional sentimental value to how they could potentially see the end of their life.
Yeah, you're not wrong. There certainly are people that can't afford to open their pocketbooks for things like that, but there are people that, as I mentioned, like a few years ago, 46% of people live paycheck to paycheck, and according to H&R Block, this past year, it's up to 85%. That means that there's a lot of people in this community that can ill afford to have, nice to haves, as nice as those things are to have. For some people, it does mean the difference between, making rent or utilities or groceries, paying their car payment or something like that. And those are the people that I try to speak for. It's been a long time since I've been paycheck to paycheck, but I still sympathize with people who are in that position, and especially people with kids and whatnot, and families that they have to take care of. And when I think about the idea of, like as I said, I supported the hospice with my own personal means. I morally support them still. I mean, I have a lot of respect actually for Joni McNeely, Dr. McNeely, for Keith Clayton. I do, because I've seen how hard they've worked. I've seen them take on this mission, and fight for it, and basically bring it from not even in existence to $6.8 million. And I actually hope that the hospice actually gets the provincial funding, because for me, it just comes down to efficiency, and in the end, it comes down to cost. And like I said, I have a hard time, saying, hey, yeah, you know what, sorry, there person who can barely make rent, you gotta, give me, another couple $100 a year or something like that for, this thing that, is nice to have, but. So I appreciate you answering my questions, and I appreciate the discussion. And yeah, I guess, yeah, I hope that the hospice, gets the funding. Failing that, I hope that that you guys, get some good financial backers. Because, like I said, my problem, I guess, if you want to call it that, is just the idea of the taxpayers of the town being, stuck with the bill, and especially the people that can't afford it.
Perfect. And I'll just make one last comment, and then I'll let everyone get on with their day. That's the beauty of having a dual system where we have a for-profit corporation that's coming in and not-for-profit. That's why, for example, the housing board exists, is for those individuals that don't have the means to live in their senior years in the facility that is proposed to be building. And so that is why this dual system exists, where there are the not-for-profits, where there are the subsidized living, and then there are those that pay the full freight. That funding for that hospice is no different than the funding between Red Deer Hospice, between other hospices across Alberta. I pose to you and I challenge you to ask the same question of Shasta. If the provincial funding gets pulled, are they going to be asking for others to subsidize it? And have you asked that question? Because they are building it on the premise that those funds will continue to exist. You'll see from the hospices around Alberta that funding is being pulled and moved on a consistent basis. So that risk will continue for a for-profit and for a not-for-profit organization, period, across the board.
Yeah, I would actually love to hear from Shasta, actually. And just to clarify, like, so my issue isn't, I'm less concerned about the people that are senior age that are you know, as bad as it sounds, that are struggling to pay the rent. I'm more concerned about the 20-something-year-old or the 30-something-year-old who, you know, would be homeless, like, yeah, maybe 40 years later they might need the hospice, but, you know, I'm talking about the people that, you know, are in their younger years now that are going to be kind of adversely affected. That's, yeah, and the seniors as well, anybody that, you know, but thank you.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at the demographic of Strathmore to confirm that it is.
Thank you. I think Councillor Peterson has just one comment or question.
I had a question. So in terms of the for-profit or model and the approved model of the hospice beds, it's my understanding that under AHS, anyone in the province can be placed in those beds. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it's not. It doesn't apply to the 106 per 100,000. And the other thing is, in my understanding, and all of the data that I've gathered on other matters related to some other health delivery processes, that 30,000 is not the number, that it's much higher in terms of our demographic under what the Calgary Health Region has designated to this area. It's much higher than that. Yeah, thank you, somebody with the numbers at hand.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, oh, sorry.
Sorry. So the 7.7 beds per 100,000, which we spoke about earlier in our meetings, was actually, it's now outdated. So stop using that. That's not a consideration of Alberta Health Services, which is a problem in and of itself, that it won't be existing regarding hospice care. The numbers that they're using have not been made available to us, and they are much higher because the palliative bed requirement is so much greater. The acute care pillar is saying that alternate level of care, ALC, beds are no longer going to be in the hospital. They're going to be moved out into the community. One of the options is to put them into long-term care facilities. In our community, it would be Shasta, or other facilities, particularly your home. So that, as in conclusion, that 7.7 beds number is no longer a feasible number. The second thing that I want to emphasize is that the level of care in a private facility that was proposed in the past, Shasta's contract from 2020, was for 3.4 hours of nursing care a day. So in a hospital, you get 24 hours of nursing care a day. In a long-term care facility like Shasta, you get 3.4 hours. So in some cases, that's enough. In the uncomplicated palliative patient, 3.4 hours of nursing care is fine. But what we're proposing is that as there's more alternate level of care, as our demographics age, as our population increases, there will be more and more beds that require complex palliative care. more nursing hours. And that's where the increased cost comes in. And that's where Alberta Health Services, or whichever pillar we end up in as a hospice, whether it's the continuing care pillar, the primary care pillar, or the acute care pillar, they don't know yet. But wherever we end up is going to need more nursing hours. And to be quite frank, we've had multiple visits with ADMs up in Edmonton, and they don't know the answer. So I think you're trying to solve a problem that they don't even know yet. So do you have any response to that?
Thank you. I'll turn now to Deputy Mayor Mitzner and then Councillor Langmaid.
Hi, so I just wanted to thank you for the clarification. That was well needed. And thank you for your presentation. And I guess I have an ask, or are you going to take this presentation to the county council, please? And share with our neighbors. Thank you.
So we haven't been asked. And I was very busy with Hike for Hospice, so to make presentations to the other councils is all on my to-do list, so.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you both for coming tonight and for your very direct and answers to some of these questions that have plagued this council for a while now. And I want to congratulate you on your successful event this past weekend at Hike for Hospice. I'm sorry I couldn't join you. I was away. Otherwise, I would have been there with you. I am very aware that there's a big difference between a bed to die in and a good death. And hospice is unfortunately one service that many, if not all of us, will hopefully require at one point in our life, barring an unexpected or accidental passing. And it's one that you don't get a chance to experience twice. And I think everyone deserves the right to a dignified death around their family, that they can feel comfortable with and pass with dignity and with respect and in a comfortable area. And I hear the concerns about advocating for those who are living paycheck to paycheck. But I also want to advocate for those who are living paycheck to paycheck, not having to watch their loved one, or God forbid themselves, die in a bed at the end of the hall because they couldn't afford a better death. Mm-hmm. And that's where organizations like yours come in. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what you have in your pocket at the end of the day. Everyone deserves a good end. And we talk a lot about this. This conversation often revolves around seniors. But I think it's also important to remember in these conversations that sometimes it's really unfortunate, but it's young people that require these services as well. Not everyone is blessed with a long and healthy life. And so you really are serving an entire population with what you've been advocating for, and what you've achieved in this community has been really impressive. And I'm excited to continue supporting you in the future, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. Thank you again for your presentation, and we wish you all the best in your future work.
Thank you.
Thank you. We move now at item 6.3, delegation, Strathmore Bird Sanctuary Initiative. I have 3 people down to speak. Are you coming up individually at one at a time or as a group? Okay, thank you. So we have Simon Metke, Ashley Mack, and Laura Matheson.
Yes, I'm Laura Matheson.
Okay.
I'm a resident at Park Lane Place, number 10. So I'm right on the corner, and according to the new plans, I'm right on the very corner of where the wetland starts in there and where number 4 is going to be developed. So our residents in the area, there had some concerns, and so we wrote a letter, and you received the letter, and I'd just like to read it because I'm kind of speaking for them as well. So the subject was urgent request to appeal the SDAB decision and stop overdevelopment adjacent to Park Lane Place. And it's addressed to Dear Mayor and members of the council. I am writing to express my deep concern regarding the proposed 147-unit Eagle Heights development adjacent to Park Lane Place, and to urgently request that Strathmore Town Council appeal the April 10th, 2025 decision of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. This highly high density development directly contradicts existing land use bylaws, which limit developments in this area to 40 units. The issuance of the permit for a 326% increase over the limit without mandatory notification of consultation to adjacent landowners represents a significant breach of due process and public trust. Park Lane Place is a 24-unit senior condo complex whose residents rely on the tranquility and the environmental benefits of the adjacent wetlands. These residents, many of whom are vulnerable seniors, were not consulted, nor were they given the meaningful opportunity to voice their concerns before the original permit was granted. While we appreciate Council's decision to revoke the development permit on February 10th, 2025, upon discovering the permitting error, the subsequent SDAB ruling has disregarded the rights and voices of the affected community. Allowing this project to proceed without addressing its procedural and legal shortcomings undermines the principles of fairness, transparency, and proper planning. This raises a critical question. Given that adjacent landowners were not consulted as required, on what basis did the Development Authority conclude that the proposed development would cause, quote, no undue interference with the amenities of the neighborhood, nor material interference with the use, enjoyment, and value of the neighboring parcels of land, quote. There remains legal uncertainty around the permit's validity. We strongly urge Council to exercise its right under Section 688 of the Municipal Government Act to appeal the SDAB decision to the Alberta Court of Appeal within the 30-day window. This action would demonstrate the town's commitment to due process and to protecting the well-being of the senior citizens and environmental assets. We are not opposed to development, but it must follow the rules, respect the character of the existing neighborhoods, and meaningfully include those most affected. Please stand with the residents of Park Lane Place and all those who believe in responsible community-focused planning. And I just had, as I thought about it, because it's of course a bit of an emotional thing for us, being right on the corner. So a lot of the comments at the appeal board were around insignificance. And just because we're seniors, we're not insignificant. This is a beautiful place to be in, and to come and put a development like this where you're going to get, what was it, the 200 or 326% increase. So the traffic will be a nightmare, especially on this corner out here. And on my corner, I said, how are they ever going to get around there? There's not an in and an out. So it's really concerning. And so when you think about it, if they have to come up to my corner and abruptly turn, I got told they'll just do a circle. They'll do a crescent. There's the room they would need for that would still affect us the same way, would be right up against it. And if that kind of development on that pond, which has got the more, as what was heard tonight, they have all the more, it's more populated with all the things we want to protect. So you start sticking asphalt in there, runoff, and that was our other concern, because I know years ago my parents lived in the same unit. And so I had heard early on that 2 of the units had problem with mold. And so, okay, and then, of course, when gossip circulates, it gets bigger. Oh, somebody had a flood over there or whatever. But no, there were the ones I know of were 2, and they had black mold, and they had to do remediation, so to get rid of it. They said it came from the canal, but after seeing Tom Sadler's reading through some of it, and I'm not an expert in any of that, I just learned over the last 4 weeks a lot, but Having said that, the water is going to flow to the southeast. We are the southeast, we're the last spot. And the fact that they had mold probably didn't necessarily come from the canal. It's the fact that it was a wet year and a high amount of water, the high water table came up, and so it came down that way. We've never had any issue, but we are a higher elevation, so it makes a difference. Anyway, those were some of the things that we were concerned about, but I understand that there is a lot of process to that, and it's not likely going to happen, which is disappointing, because this should have been done in the very beginning of the project. Look at who's around you. There's Lambert Village, there's us, there's that other apartment, and there's several others around that are older people. You've got the library that uses elderly people be in all the time, the Happy Gang. And you're going to stick multi-story, different ages. It would be different if it was a 40 unit or like a 20 unit with 40 people max, like ours, designed in some fashion, and we're talking about a place for seniors to be. That would be most of the time, those places, our places, don't even have to be advertised. They're flipped. When somebody moves out, somebody's right there to buy it and move in. It speaks to the use of it. And if there's another 20 out the other way instead of an apartment block, and it's like the song, put up the parking lot. And that doesn't fit into a rural community, doesn't fit into the wetlands, and definitely not in the wetlands. And it doesn't fit into a senior's environment very well. Anyway, sorry I took up the time. Just got upset. Sorry. Simon can.
How much time do we have left?
Well, this is 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try and be real quick. It's hard for me. Ironically, we talked about a lot of things tonight with regards to wetlands. Ironically, the town is going to be gifted a large part of wetlands that's just adjacent to this property that we're talking about. In the course of 1 year, we've almost given away, or we're going to be developing all the wetlands in the center of town. Not necessarily a popular idea, but I'd like the CAO or maybe the town to consider perhaps buying this property, or at least partnering with a corporate sponsor to help buy this property so that we can actually preserve the entirety of that section. That would be something worthwhile. Other than that, all we're looking for is some hope to sort of figure out what else can be done to prevent this development from proceeding. That's all.
Thank you, Honorable Council, for having us be able to present this again. And I don't envy the heaviness of the decisions that have to be made and how incredible of a long-term effect this is. We as humans are using the term wetlands to describe this area, but obviously all the organisms that we're talking about, they just know it as what they use as their environment, and all of those different environments are not equal. This is the most biologically diverse section of the wetlands for a specific reason. It is a wonderful win that the other section could be preserved as a bird sanctuary, and that's wonderful, but it would only probably be half the bird population, if less than that, when the place that they use the most is totally decimated by the consequences of developing something so out of character in that area. So again, it's nice to have a future concept of that it's going to be preserved, that one section, but if the main heart of the wetlands is destroyed, then you can just see obviously the consequences of what that is going to add up to for the rest of the wetlands basically being, the birds are just not going to come back. It's going to change, and localized extinction is going to lead to mass extinction, and it's going to, I'm just sorry that it's decisions that you guys have to make that essentially have such long-term huge consequences, so I really feel for you all.
Thank you. In our in-camera, we we agreed to have CAO Scoble be able to come forward and read a statement that may shed some light on the situation that has been ongoing for quite a while. CAO Scoble.
Thank you, Mayor. So Four Park Lane is private property. The town does not own the property, nor does the town currently own the land around the stormwater pond. It too is private property. The town currently only owns Gray Park in the area, which is north of the walking trail around the south end of the large slough. Per the public hearing this evening and the decision made by council, there is opportunity for the town to take ownership of the land around the storm pond, and there has been this opportunity since 2010, but this does not include Four Park Lane. So this land can be used for a conservation and interpretive area for wetlands. The West Creek property, per the presentation earlier this evening, currently encompasses the entire bank of the water body, plus some land from the bank varying in distance around the circumference of the pond. The Calgary Regional Planning Commission conditionally approved multifamily and commercial in the area, including on this parcel, in 1990. A subdivision plan was registered with land titles in 1992. The land was direct controlled DC2 for a time, which means a site-specific use with multifamily housing intended for the parcel. In 2008, Land Use Bylaw 8920 was amended, and the lands were districted for R3 apartment housing with a maximum density of 75 dwellings per hectare, and apartment housing was listed as a discretionary use if over 20 units, and apartment housing under 20 units was listed as a permitted use. Most importantly, in September 2014, the town adopted Land Use Bylaw 1411, which designated the site as R3 high-density residential district with a density of 100 dwellings per hectare and housing with apartments listed as a permitted use. The issue with the development permit was that there was variances in density and area with the proposed project that required notification to affected landowners to provide those landowners the opportunity to appeal the development permit to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. This notification was not done, and upon discovery, the development officer canceled the development permit. Council has no role in approving nor canceling the development permit and has no role in this issue to this point. Council's role was in 2014 and prior statutory plan decisions, consistent with town bylaws established and consistent with common practice in Alberta for development matters. Subsequently, the Subdivision Development Appeal Board heard the appeal from the developer on the permit cancellation and in its decision rescinded the cancellation of the development permit. As part of the appeal process, all affected landowners were notified of the appeal hearing by the methods stipulated by the province, and affected landowners that chose to provided written submissions and/or attended the SDAB appeal hearing. Therefore, the notifications emitted originally during the issuance of the development permit were completed for the appeal hearing, so there is no longer a notification issue, which is the reason that the development permit was canceled initially. The Town of Strathmore Wetland Conservation Plan was completed in 2005. In that plan, ST19, which is the stormwater pond at Four Park Lane, is ranked as a Class 4 biologically significant wetland, and it outlines the hierarchical approach to protect wetlands. The hierarchy is avoidance of impacts, minimization and mitigation of unavoidable impacts, mitigation for development impacts that cannot be minimized. Mitigation options include wetland restoration, enhancement of wetland function of existing wetlands, creation of new wetlands that will replace all of the key functions of wetland lost or degraded as a result of development disturbance, and compensation banking for the enhancement or creation of wetlands. Those are Tom Sadler's words in that report. However, this hierarchy remains consistent to this day with current Alberta wetland policy strategies of relative wetland value and wetland mitigation, specifically avoidance, minimization, and replacement. The Town of Strathmore Wetland Conservation Policy was developed in 2007. The policy talks in 1.2.4 about no net loss of wetlands by avoiding impacts to wetlands and wetland areas, minimizing impact to wetlands and wetland areas, and requiring applicable compensation and compensating for impacts to wetlands and wetland areas that cannot be avoided or minimized. It also talks about utilizing development setbacks from wetlands per portions of 1.1.4. To ensure that wetlands are protected from impacts of development, the following development setbacks will be utilized. No development shall be permitted within 30 meters of the legal bank of a permanent or naturally occurring wetland on the Class 4 to Class 7 Stewart and Cantred system. This is a Class 4 pond. Or such greater distance determined necessary by a qualified wetland aquatic environmental specialist. And except where approved by the province of Alberta for such use, no wetland within the town shall be used for the storage and dilution of untreated stormwater. The town has province of Alberta approval to use this pond for stormwater. And per 1.12 and 1.13, the town will develop a wetland implementation plan and incorporate the principles and strategies of the wetland implementation plan into statutory documents, planning documents, including the land use bylaw. The clauses on no net loss and setbacks create ambiguity if the principles of avoidance, minimization, and mitigation are applied, which require clarification in any new policy. However, these clauses have no bearing as administration can find no evidence the wetland implementation plan was completed after the policy was adopted in 2007, and no wetland elements are incorporated into the land use bylaw. Bylaw trumps policy. The land use bylaw trumps the wetland conservation policy, and the development officer has no ability to consider issues and policies outside of the land use bylaw in decision-making by the authorities given by the land use bylaw. Specifically, the wetlands issue cannot be considered in decision-making by the development officer as the wetlands policy elements were not incorporated into the land use bylaw. The development officer did not consider wetlands in issuing the development permit, nor did they consider wetlands in canceling the development permit, as wetlands provisions are not in the land use bylaw. The decision to cancel the development permit was made on the basis of the land use bylaw provisions in consultation with legal advice. Looking at the storm pond area, the storm pond likely has more water in it now than in pre-settlement times and or a higher wetland ranking, and notwithstanding climate impact and all other things remaining the same, it will likely have more water in it in the future as other areas of the town grow due to anthropogenic or human-induced effects. Canal seepage with a major canal through and to the north of the stormwater system series of ponds is likely a contributor to the water in the ponds. If you observe all the pivots that have been going into agricultural lands in southern Alberta over the last 20 years or so, this is to conserve water, eliminating canals and ditches and replacing with pipes and pivots to minimize water losses due to seepage and evaporation. Using the Water Board's runoff coefficient fact sheet, sandy soil pasture has a runoff coefficient of 0.05 to 0.25. This is the closest I could find to pre-settlement natural grasslands, and we all know there's a lot of sand in Strathmore. This means 5 to 25% of precipitation runs off into surface water bodies. The majority is absorbed into the soils. In the case of development, residential single-family areas have a runoff coefficient of 0.3 to 0.5, meaning 30 to 50% of the precipitation runs off to surface water bodies, and multifamily attached units have a runoff coefficient of 0.6 to 0.75, meaning 60 to 75% of the precipitation runs off to the surface water bodies. With urban development, precipitation falls on asphalt and concrete instead of what used to be grassland, and it is directly conveyed by pipes without loss or delay to water bodies instead of draining overland. It seems very probable more water is being conveyed to the ponds due to human impacts than pre-settlement, all other things such as climate effects remaining the same. More water means more life of all types in a localized ecosystem. The current area of Grey Park, which the town owns, is 15.2 hectares. The West Creek area discussed earlier this evening, and which includes the pond next to 4 Park Lane, is 26.6 hectares, or 1.72 times the size of Grey Park. The West Creek area is intended for enhanced wetlands and ultimately to be a conservation and interpretive area. If this happens, the wetland in this overall area will almost triple. The water body and a portion of the land beyond the legal bank on the southwest portion of the proposed development will not be impacted by the proposed development. However, a portion of the land in the wetland buffer will likely be impacted by the town or by the development with the unofficial town setback as a minimum of 30 meters for a Class 4 wetland. And the property line is approximately 15 meters from the bank in the southwest area, noting a legal survey has not been completed. The estimated area of impact is 0.3 hectares, which is 1.13% of the future enhanced wetland conservation and interpretive area to be turned over to the town from West Creek. Notwithstanding, a portion of the already developed lakeside views also appears to be in a portion of the wetland buffer. If the town takes ownership of these lands, it can choose to apply the Wetland Conservation Plan and provincial wetland conservation principles of avoidance and minimization to 98.9% of these lands, less the portion in lakeside views. The four park lane developer will be required by the province to apply the principle of wetland mitigation, which is the town plan term, or replacement, which is the provincial term, to the 1.13% of the lands in which they are impacting in the wetland buffer. Administration completed a wetland study in 2024 and has a draft policy to update from the 2007 policy. The draft policy has been put on hold, both to make sure it is up to par, particularly with the developments this evening with West Creek and the opportunity to incorporate an enhanced wetland conservation and interpretive area into it, but also to not create further consternation and perceptions while this current issue has been going on. A municipality does not have legislative responsibility for provincial or federal environmental regulations. A municipality can establish environmental reserve for a filter strip to prevent pollution of a water body, municipal reserve for public access, or conservation easements, but the municipality has to own these lands, or in the case of an easement, enter into an agreement with the landowner. Municipalities can also create de facto buffer zones, as deemed by the province as stepping back from the water, a beneficial management practices guide for new development near water bodies in Alberta's settled region. A de facto buffer is created through regulation intended for other purposes, such as land subject to flooding or subsidence, or that is low-lying, marshy, or unstable, or on land adjacent to or within a specified distance of the bed and shore of any lake, river, stream, or other body of water. The 30-meter minimum setback in the wetland conservation is such a de facto buffer, but it is not applicable in permitting as it is not stipulated in the land use bylaw as discussed. It is our understanding that some municipalities have discontinued wetland policies, defaulting to the provincial requirements as they are the ultimate regulator for related issues, and as a result of the discrepancy that can be created in requirements between different levels of government. Coincidentally, the province announced $8.7 million today in grants through the Wetland Replacement Program to help municipalities and nonprofits build more wetlands. This is supported by Ducks Unlimited Canada and the NAIT Centre for Boreal Research in the media release. This may be something the town looks at, candidate projects for, and areas for, and seeks funding through the program from the province. While this may not be the outcome everyone is seeking, development will happen in some form at the parcel. Development has been enabled on this parcel since at least 1990. Apartments have been permitted since at least 2014, and the wetland impacts identified will have to be mitigated by the developer to the satisfaction of the province. At the same time, there are significant opportunities for enhancement of almost 99% of the West Creek wetland area and establishment of a wetland conservation and interpretive area, as well as the opportunity to establish new wetlands going forward with the support of the province.
Thank you. And I see Ashley Mack is here. She's the third member of the delegation. Would you like to say a few words? Please keep in mind we've eaten up a lot of the time.
For sure. I'll make this quick. I just wanted to say, first and foremost, I don't know where I heard this, but the old railway, where all the houses are now, there was like a railway tie that dated back to like the Silk Road merchant something. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? And then got destroyed and houses are there now. So that would have been something cool to say for our history, for our future, for the legacy. I remember going to the swamp here, Mr. Erickson, I was in grade 3, he was my principal, and he took us on a field trip, and I walked all the way down the canal. I had no idea where we were, and he took me there, and that's when we learned about water spiders, and when I, in my little kid mind, started to comprehend the unique and diverse system that is just this like weird pond. It just looks like a pond, like it's just like a weird pond. But it was so much more and so much deeper and greater than that. And that was like a pivotal core memory that I had. And now that we live there, like it took me a couple months, and I just, something about looking out, and I was like, oh, this is where Mr. Erickson took us. Like, I can't believe this is still here, preserved, pristine. And now I can't believe it's just going to be bulldozed. And that is so sad. And that's all I have to say. I don't even want to live here anymore.
Thank you. That concludes our delegations for tonight. We move now to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments regarding items on the agenda tonight. Please note this is your time to let council know your thoughts. Comments will not be taken from the gallery after this portion of the meeting concludes. While council welcomes public comments and questions, there will be no debating during this section. I'd like to remind everyone that if you do wish to speak, please raise your hand and you can be called to the microphone. As we want to hear from as many members of the public as possible, we ask that speakers try to be succinct, with comments focused on presenting council with new information. Each member of the public has 5 minutes to speak on an item on today's agenda. And just before we get started, please be aware that a bell will ring at the 4-minute mark, giving you 1 minute to conclude your comments. Is there anyone left here, present, who wishes to speak on an agenda item tonight? Seeing... Oh, sure.
What do you think about Araya's home? Do you want them to take Araya's home away? Oh, she wants to watch a show. She doesn't even want to talk.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing and hearing none, we'll conclude that. And at this point, we're on item 8, closed meeting.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Jonathan?
There was somebody...
Hi, my name is Kema Era, and I just live on Thomas Drive. I got approached yesterday at my home. I don't want that. I'm hearing that we're not taking out the whole middle area where the pond is and all that, but the building is still going to go along on the southeast side there. So I don't know what we can really do here to actually stop this from happening, because apparently it's been set in motion since 2010. So I just want to express that I would not want that place to become something what it is right now. If you were to take that away and build more there, you'd be taking more away from the town. It's diversity, right? It's like a little sanctuary in the middle of this town. If we keep growing it the way out how we've been, and having these things in the middle will be a lot better for the future, especially when we become a city and it's no longer the town of Strathmore. Having these things will be a benefit for the town, I believe. So just wanted to express that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else in the gallery? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move now to item 8, closed meeting. I'm looking for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Peterson, Jonathan.
Sorry, Your Worship. I was just wondering if council would consider extending the meeting past 10 o'clock before going in camera.
So, Your Worship, if I could make a motion to extend the meeting to 11 p.m. and to move in camera at 9:45. Do you want to in a separate motion?
Jonathan, do you think it's best in separate motions?
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Ultimately, it's up to council to make sure that all councils
I think
knows
we
what
can
they're voting on,
understand it.
but it's up to council.
Well, and to move in camera at 9:40. Actually, let's move in camera at 9:50 and take. I would move that we take a 3-minute break.
Okay, thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor?